Hello, I just got this today and I thought I'd do a quick unboxing video of it. It is the Emax Tinyhawk. There's already a lot of reviews out there about it. So far, everything looks about the same that I've seen in other reviews, but in mine, I got a different charger. This charger only does the lithium high volt cells, the 4.35 volt cells. Also, you can switch between 0.6 and 0.2 amps charging rate. You can charge 6 at once. Thought it was interesting that I got a different charger than everybody else has been getting, but this is a newer batch. Guess things may have changed. So everything else that's in here, there's a few Emax stickers. My pouch came torn inside because they had to fit this new charger. I got a really small screwdriver. Looks like an extra pigtail in case I damage mine, and some extra grommets and screws. The instructions. And then the drone itself. Seeing it in person, I am surprised at how small it is. I'm used to 2-inch, 2.5-inch, 3-inch quads. I built a lot of those. Wow, this is really little. And this battery just slides out of here. Now, one thing I wanted to point out, this comes with a built-in FreeSky receiver, but there are solder pads right here for 3.3 volts. This is where you could solder up a Spectrum receiver, these 3 pads down here at the tip of my finger. And then I believe directly on the other side, or maybe it's opposite, when I was looking at a lot of pictures online, I did find the pads for 5 volts ground and S-bus, so you can solder on a FlySky receiver as well. It's not limited to just the FreeSky guys. A few other interesting things, there's a lot of extra soldering points on here where you could solder on a buzzer. There's 3 little solder points here, 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 and here. You could solder on your own motors. You could use this flight controller for a number of different quadcopters. The frame itself is actually a lot softer and more squishy than I would have guessed, which I assume that's why it survives crashes so well. Like everyone else has been saying, there are no extra props in here. I think I went ahead and ordered some just in case. Now, one thing I wanted to do was double check its weight. It weighs in, without a battery, at 28.3 grams. Now, the lens cap weighs 0.3 grams, so it weighs 28 grams. And then just to compare that to some other whoops, here's a little brushless one I built. It also weighs 28.3. This brushless one weighs 33.6, so it's lighter than this. This little guy that I just finished about a week ago, 27.5, so this weighs just a hair less, but it's not nearly as durable. We've got a brushed whoop. It weighs in at 18.7, and a more powerful, this one has bigger motors, brushed motors, 24.6. So the brushed whoops still weigh a bit less, although it's only 4 grams heavier than my best brushed whoop. Not so bad. And then it's got an F4 flight controller, it's got smart audio, all the good technology that we really want, except for turtle mode. I haven't tried it, but everyone says it cannot do turtle mode. Here's the setup I did in beta flight. First, I looked through everything just to make sure it's what I wanted. I saw the arming was at a low degree, so I changed it to 180 degrees so I can arm the quad in case it's stuck in a tree or upside down. The DShot beacon, I turned it all on since there's no buzzer. I turned off the USB so the beacon buzzer sound doesn't happen while it's sitting on the bench. Here I'm adjusting the cell voltage because it's a 1-cell battery, it'll sag, and I want it to be able to fly a little longer. And I noticed the RSSI signal strength wasn't working quite how I wanted, and so I changed that setting. But don't do that. I learned later that that's not something I want to do. I set the RSSI channel for channel 5 because I could see that that's the channel it was on. And then here I'm checking all the controls, making sure they move appropriately. The deadband, I noticed some drifting, so I turned up the deadband. Here I'm setting the different modes that I have set up already on my transmitter. I'm making its modes work, Betaflight's modes work with my transmitter. I like having a beeper, so I'm turning on a beeper. Although later, I couldn't actually get the beeper to work for a while. Now, I'm going to make another video explaining all that. Here I'm trying to check out how I can get turtle mode working. I've never tried that on a quad yet. I'm trying to get the beeper set up. I'm making sure that my switches are doing what I think they're doing. I've never tested out Acro Trainer or the pit mode, I decided not to try out Acro Trainer, didn't really need it, but I did want to try out the VTX pit mode, so I was testing if I could use the same switch to run turtle mode and the VTX pit mode if I did it in a smart way. The OSD wasn't set up quite how I wanted, so I thought I'd play with that just a little bit. Having the crosshairs in the middle helps me aim and get through gates better, and small gaps. I have to slide the information in from the sides because I use the HD2 goggles. HD2 goggles have blurry edges, and I can't see the information if it's too close to the edges. Here I'm checking what profiles are already on there. There's really no difference in any of the profiles except profile 1, which surprised me. All the other profiles are the same. I thought I read that we were supposed to have different profiles. I went back and upped the minimum cell voltage a little bit because I didn't want to damage the battery. Here's just a quick test flight to make sure everything's functioning correctly. I also wanted to quickly check and see how well it can fly in a very small area. First time doing a quick hover test in acro mode. I just switched to Horizon mode and now I'm doing another hover test. I wanted to point out a couple more things that I didn't notice earlier. First of all, with this case, there is a section here that removes out, so that allows you to fit a battery in there. Because this charger is longer than what they originally planned, it hits the USB plug for the charger. Batteries don't fit in there very well, but you can fit a couple in here. If you try and fit them vertically, I don't know, that doesn't work. So you can fit about 2 of them over here. You might be able to somehow squeeze 1 or 2 over in here. The other thing that's rather important to me, this battery lead is incredibly short, and I wanted to point out that it is very, very difficult to get this to plug in. It doesn't want to plug in. So the only way I've been able to figure out how to plug it in is you slide the battery in, and then you have to very carefully get this to line up and snap together, and then it barely fits, but it fits. And so now it can fly. Unplugging it is even more difficult. You have to kind of squeeze in there and pop it out. And I think it would be almost impossible, but I went in with a knife, and on this plug, there's a part where there's this kind of vertical fin that lines up with the slot on this plug, and then you can see 2 holes on the sides where there's 2 little bumps that lock the battery in, but those bumps connect so tightly in there, make the connector so tight that it's almost impossible to pull it back out. So I went in with a knife and I shaved off both the bumps, and it still connects in plenty tight enough. I've never had a problem with those coming loose. I've done that on many other batteries that use this same connector because it's so difficult to get it unplugged once it's locked in with those 2 little bumps. As a bit of advice, I'd go in with a knife and cut those 2 little bumps off so it's much easier to get the battery in and out. Like I said, I've never had a problem with it coming unplugged when I didn't want it to. I do that to all my batteries. I was just thinking about it. I noticed that when you put this in its case, there's actually a lot of extra room above it. If you were careful, you could put some batteries up here since you lost your space over here and you can only fit a couple there. You could fit quite a few right here. I don't know if I'd leave them loose in there. I might wrap them in something thin to protect them so they don't cause damage or short, but yeah, you can fit a few in there. Now let's get to some flight footage. I set up a small course. It's the kind of place I would be flying a regular tiny whoop with very small gaps. I have all these footrests put out and couches so that I can fly around between them. I wanted to see how stable this was and how easy it was to fly compared to other tiny whoops that I've flown. Turns out it's actually a little bit harder to fly. It's not quite as stable in the very tight proximity areas. The camera's pretty good for a tiny whoop though, I think. When other people say it's bad, they're just comparing it to the higher quality cameras on 5-inch drones and much bigger outdoor drones, but compared to other tiny whoops, this camera's just fine. If you look at the RSSI, it says 9%, 10%, and that's because of that setting in Betaflight that I got wrong. So you definitely shouldn't switch that button in Betaflight. You need to leave it off. I did go and change it later, but not until after I filmed all of this. One thing I was really excited about was the microphone. I had no idea there was a microphone until I was filming this. I changed the PID profile, but I meant to change the rate profile. I wanted to see how Betaflight stock rates compared to the rates that Emax programmed into it. But instead, I left the rates the way Emax programmed them, but changed the PID settings, and it made this little whoop fly much more jerky and much more out of control. Betaflight stock PID values are bad on this, but the Emax ones are actually quite good. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. I have a lot more videos coming as soon as I can get them made. Thanks.